welcome everyone to today's virtual event, ROI Storytelling, Crafting Compelling Business Value Narratives. We're so happy you can join us for this session. I'll quickly introduce our panel. We have our host, Jack Cochran, General Manager of PSC, Aditya Ahuja, Cloud Security Solutions Consultant at Palo Alto Networks, Allison Maklick, Director of Solutions at Ontic, and Justin McDonald, Co-founder and CEO of Salio. A couple quick housekeeping items. Please engage in the chat, share your thoughts, share your LinkedIn. Be sure you switch from host and panelists to everyone so we can see what you have to say. If you have questions, we have about 15 minutes at the end of this session for live Q&A, so drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Finally, I want to give a huge thank you to our partners at Salio for helping bring this session to the community today. And I will pass it off to you, Jack, to kick things off.
Thanks, Courtney, and welcome our panelists. Are really excited to have you all here going through our topic today. I'm focusing around bringing value through storytelling, the ROI of storytelling, and focusing on value. I think we've all heard about that. We've all heard about why we need to be storytellers. We've all heard it many times, but I think exploring kind of more of the value side of things and how we can bring value and share value through that's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm excited for us to all get started. The question that I want to start with, and I want to throw to everyone in the panel, is what makes an ROI story unforgettable? So if we want to, something that will stick in your mind, right? What would make an ROI story unforgettable? Allison, I'll go to you first. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what makes something unforgettable.
Sure. So I think ROI and what I like to call value-based storytelling, I think it's memorable. And it's memorable because it's human, it's tangible, and it's surprising. So if you think about just like human beings in general, we are going to remember stories 22 times more than facts. Like it's just a part of our nature. And so as storytellers and weaving that into ourselves, people are going to remember that versus just telling them, hey, here's a tangible fact, right? Like we're going to save you 30% savings on X. That's great. But really driving the story that matters and connecting that on a human level, it has very surprising benefits in what they remember. And I know we're just kicking off real fast, but in terms of surprising, it's very, very cool of what you can do with stories. So one example, I worked with a nonprofit that worked with veterans, for example, and we were going through our product. This is a past company. But what was happening was that when veterans were in need of help and they were on the website, and if they were looking at a certain amount of articles that dealt with getting help in a time frame, then a pop-up could connect them or a chat box or something to give them a phone number to connect immediately right then. So then when you think about like the surprising element of stories, their ROI actually meant how fast could they interject to help save a life. So when you start telling those kind of things, you can start tying the tangible, the human piece to the surprising and make your storytelling that much more powerful. So I'm a big fan of this. That's why I'm going on 2 hours of sleep and still talking about it here today, because I've seen the power of storytelling.
I love you sharing a story about storytelling while you're telling us about storytelling.
And thank you. Yes.
Layers. Justin, would love to hear your thoughts on this. What makes an ROI storytelling unforgettable?
Well, that's great, Jack. I appreciate you hosting. It's great to be here. I would say it needs to be valid and accurate first and foremost, right? I think pre-sales can measure BS that in parts per billion, especially as you're going into an audience and talking to a customer. So it needs to be valid and accurate. I think it needs to be relevant in context with the data and metrics that are important to the buyer. I've seen so many cases where you bring ROI, you bring different concepts, different stories, but it completely misses the mark on the actual pain and solution that you're solving for. So you need to make sure that the story is actually relevant to what your buyer or customer cares about. And I think for me, if I look at strategies for really effective storytelling, things that are unforgettable, it's always through the lens of a customer, right? An actual story, the ROI that is told through the paradigm and or the actual customer experience that may resonate with the buyer or the prospect.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I know a lot of the suggestions I'm seeing in chat talking about kind of different book recommendations, a lot of them get to that same piece as well around relevancy of the story that you're telling. I think it's absolutely right. Aditya, I said I would ask everyone this. Would love to get your take on the same question.
Yeah, of course. Would love to. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. The one word that I love to use for ROI stories being unforgettable is try to make it personalized. That's the one word that I try to, that's the one rule that I try to live by is how do I make it personalized for the said customer, for the said individual that I'm talking to. I really try to make the customer feel their transformation. And when I say feel, I'm really using air quotes, feel the transformation as though, how do they really see their business changing? How do they come out a hero by investing in the solution, right? How do you show them that single wow metric that they can walk away from? A vivid before and after, as I like to say, as in, hey, this is where you're at today. This is where you can be tomorrow. This is a little metric that you can take with you that, hey, just an example, as in with this product, with this solution, you're saving these many man hours, you're saving this much revenue, you're making this much more. That's the metric, that's the wow metric, as I like to say, that they walk back with, and they come out becoming a hero. So that's something as personalized as we can make it to this specific customer, to this specific individual, as in, hey, how do you invest in this with us? How do you come on this journey with us? And how do you come out being a hero, right? So that's something that I've always done that I feel the long-term relationships that I've built with some of my stakeholders have always been when I have personalized those scenarios for them. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Love it. And you're all already kind of pushing towards, what the main topic of the webinar here, which is talking about value in the context of pre-sales, sales engineering, and sales, right? So making a story unforgettable, really making that hero, making it relevant, making it actionable. How do we take it to the next step? Which you've already kind of all hinted at this a little bit. Aditya, you mentioned kind of metrics. Would love to hear more maybe about that. How do you relate that back and make sure it's um, connected into the value we're trying to present to someone as sellers?
Right. Yeah, of course. So when I say metrics, it's really bringing forward the point as to why would you invest in something today and why would you invest in something at all, right? So when I say positioning the customer as the hero of the story, it's like if you do not invest in something today, what are you losing out on? And then why do you need to invest in it today, right itself? So one of the examples that I love to kind of bring from is one of the healthcare customers that I've always worked with is that healthcare is a mission critical industry. I worked in cybersecurity for a couple of years now. I live and breathe cybersecurity. So healthcare is one of the spaces that is mission critical, right? So how do I go in? How do I show them the metrics as in, hey, the solution that I'm trying to show you, the solution that we're evaluating, how is that impacting patient health? That's the core of your business, right? If there is a cyber attack from a cybersecurity standpoint, how does that affect your business, and how does that affect the whole ethos of the business, which is in providing patients that care, right? If your systems are compromised, your systems are down, that just puts the hospital or the care provider at at a standstill. So just getting to that point of showing them why something is necessary, that's something that I try to bring through in my story. So yeah, that's one of the quick examples that I wanted to share with that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Making it again, kind of back to Allison's point, making it more relevant. Allison, would love to hear kind of your perspective because you already started getting into this already with a story that you were telling us about before. What's kind of your tricks that you've had on making things more relatable and more measurable to people you're telling stories to?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, like I just really try to lean into the human element. So even when, you have your assigned accounts and you have your assigned deals, if there's an opportunity where you have that connection to, try to pull from that, even when you're starting your discovery. And so an example of this, I was a leader, but I kind of jumped into an IC role because we were presenting to my alma mater. And I worked before, I'm in security now. But before, for 10 years, I was in Marcom. And I had an example. This was even before discovery. This is kind of like our, hey, let's get into the room to present. Like, let us show you what we can bring. And I was like, I have a really good real world example. I have graduated, oh my gosh, 16 years ago. And I was getting emails from the dean's office, the athletics office, and the comm school that I went to asking me to be a Texas X. So, okay, surprise, that's where the school was. But I had already joined Texas X's 16 years before. So none of the communications were making sense. And it just so happened when we were brainstorming with the entire SE team, global, hey, does anyone have any experience? I was able to say, hey, I do. I would love to share my experience. I would love to come in and show that because systems are disconnected, right? That's the whole point of this. We need to have breaking down silos, have not a disconnected system. We could have gone in there and said that and said, our product will help you connect your systems. However, even before we got the right to have discovery, I could come in and I could show, literally mirrored my phone and said, this week alone, I received this email, I received this email, and I received this email. So think about me as the end user. I'm already a member. Like, you could be upselling me. You could go into events when instead you're focused on me joining something that I've already been a member of for years. And it was this huge light bulb moment for, my alma mater, for everyone in the room, to then essentially let us have access to then do deep discovery. Why is this happening? Let's focus on the ROI and let's go deeper, deeper, deeper from there. But I really like to, when we have a big opportunity or even a small one, it doesn't matter, kind of looking at your pre-sales team, thinking about how you can start making those human connections from the very beginning. Or maybe there's a different, art of the possible or something that you've worked with. But I've just really learned that leaning on your team and your real world experiences helps so much from the very get-go.
Yeah, Allison, I totally agree. I think in conjunction with the human element is this really great discovery. So obviously we're all in pre-sales. I got my start 20 years ago in software pre-sales, and you hear discovery tips and tricks 101, but it's so critical as it relates to storytelling, because if you don't nail the discovery, I've seen it go sideways where you think you have an understanding of the need, you think you have an understanding of the pain point, and then because you're slightly off in terminology, you're slightly off on maybe the pain point that really matters in the room or the business outcome that's going to drive a particular project forward. You spend all of this time either in your demo talk track and your storytelling, and because the discovery was done incorrectly or it was interpreted correctly, or maybe the AE is passing information that wasn't correctly translated to the SE, you may tell the best story, but if it's not hitting the mark, if it's not solving a pain point, it's all for naught. If anything, it will do more damage than good. So I think just making sure that you're correlating great discovery, really good understanding of pain points and the business challenges they're looking to solve with your solution, and then making sure that aligns tightly with the storytelling.
I think that's such a good point, Justin, and just on why I like to call it value-based storytelling versus just ROI storytelling. I think ROI is a piece of it, but I
Yeah.
think the value comes from understanding what they're trying to solve for. Like you said, their language, you understand their world to then show the ROI for them. And I have seen it go sideways, and I have seen it
Yeah.
what we think is going to be this amazing, oh, look at what we could save. And they're like, you don't understand us at all. Oh, okay, let's dive back into discovery. Like, what are we doing here? But I think that just like you said, even when you're presenting using their nomenclature, using how this will help them versus look how amazing our product is, it's that flip that I think is where the power comes in.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, discovery is never done, I think is the phrase I've heard, right? Even with this. So it's and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Justin, would love to hear your thoughts on this, because this is what you'd initially brought up. But sometimes when we are going through and doing a little bit of that, even storytelling within our discovery, we're asking the right questions. We hear something like a complaint will come up. We hear something about a problem that someone has. How do you translate those complaints and those real pains that someone's feeling directly into value when you're telling that story?
Oh, goodness. Complaint about what, Jack? So just curious, like business problem complaints? Like what do you mean by
Yeah,
complaint?
not there. I'm assuming this would be like not someone who's a current
This is good
customer, but
discovery, right? Just making sure I understand your question before I
yeah,
answer.
yeah, I love it. You're getting clarification, because I could have meant five things. I meant
Yeah.
business problems that they have about what their current environment.
Okay. So yes. So I'd say one, make sure you're clarifying, double clarify. And I would say triangulate multiple sources as well. So one of the things that we see, and I've seen in my entire software career, is you could have one person that cares about something deeply, but maybe 5 or 6 other people either aren't aware of it, not struggling with it, don't grasp it, or are aware of it and say, hey, this doesn't really move the needle for the business. So just really triangulating and making sure the story that you're setting out, the strategy for the demo that you're walking into is really hitting the mark around the people that matter, right? I'll give you an example as well. So, gosh, 2005, I got my start in pre-sales in the GRC world. So governance, risk, and compliance. Allison and Aditya talked about a couple of healthcare examples. So I'll pull a healthcare example. So we used to sell GRC software into big healthcare organizations, and every single organization will call something different. Like our solution around incident management and this compliance workspace and this entire SaaS product back then was targeted in this area, but people would use the terms like risk management. They would use the term incident management or case management or hotline management. And so I could go in and tell a story in pre-sales or set the stage for a particular parameter with just one slight variation of terminology, and it would completely miss the mark, even though I'm saying the same thing. So that really good situational awareness to understand how your buyer speaks, the things that they care about. When they say one thing, like, is it trying to, have a Rosetta Stone? Like one of the biggest superpowers for pre-sales is understanding how to have a Rosetta Stone that translates to like what your product does, the features of functionality, but also the business value. So just making sure that you're speaking in the language of your prospect or customer. And then through the construct of how your application works, because your UI may call it incident management, but if to them incident management is case management or risk management or some other terminology that may be unrelated to healthcare, it deeply, deeply matters when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah, I'd like to add a quick thought there also, just because Justin mentioned the security side of the house, so I had to jump in.
Yeah.
Just in terms of especially when your go-to-market is for a bigger product portfolio. I'm going to speak from a product portfolio perspective. If you're going to the customer with a very specific product and solution, then a lot of times the customer would know what you're bringing to the table, what you're talking about, and the conversation could go smoothly. But when you're going with 10 different product lines with their own different names, just like Justin was mentioning, incident management, risk prevention, just a lot of those, a lot of the jargon there. It's just so important to ask those probing questions, as I like to say, as in, hey, what does this mean for you? As Justin and Allison have been mentioning, as in, what does this term mean to you? Because for us as a company, for our product, this could mean a certain thing, whereas for you, this could mean a completely different thing. There's also figuring out what this person's role is at the company and trying to deep narrow down into what part they might be talking about. So it's that good mix of asking them questions as well as building a little map for yourself on your little scratch pad here, as in, hey, so this is where I'm going to navigate this conversation and not try to boil the ocean with them. Trying to bring them home with something that they can see value within that first call that we get on with them, rather than bringing up. I always avoid bringing up big slide decks. Sometimes they're necessary, but a lot of times, instead of boiling the ocean, especially when you're going in with a bigger portfolio. So yeah, that was quick 2 cents right there. Quick.
Yeah, I mean that's those are definitely, yeah, some of the big, I mean, I'm going to call them necessarily mistakes, but I say missteps maybe that I've seen people take for sure, right? Not speaking the right language, as you and Justin had also mentioned, speaking too broadly where someone might not understand you're not putting the right context for somebody. Allison, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, as I'm sure you've seen some mistakes made as well. What are some mistakes or missteps that you've seen in addition that have derailed from telling a good story?
Yeah, it happens. It happens all the time, right? So you kind of have to take your ego out of it and come back to the drawing board. So I'll give you an example. So we worked on this big digital transformation with another veteran community. I used to work in nonprofits a lot. And what we had seen was that other, nonprofits at the time, it was very, very COVID heavy. We're trying to streamline communications, right? And so we came, even after discovery, like we had multiple discoveries with them. And we said, well, we know that if you streamline this, it's going to save you X% in terms of communication, in terms of getting to your community. And we were so excited and we presented it to them. And they were like, that's not what we want. Where did you get that? And we're like, oh, that's what everyone else wants. That's not what they wanted. So this use case, for example, it's pretty singular to this nonprofit, but they had an app, they had multiple Facebook pages, they wanted their community members to be making these events, but they couldn't track them. So our idea was, oh, we'll just consolidate, you have one stream. And they're like, no, no, no. The power is that these community members, we want them to make more of those. And we were like, oh, got it. Okay. We all need to get in a room. So what we did is we had been talking to only one team, right? We got stakeholders from almost every department in the company. We flew them all into Dallas and we had a full day workshop. And we made sure that everyone in the room, kind of Justin, I think you brought this up, they could hear their pain points, things that were so critical and important that we missed completely, even with discovery, even we thought this was this beautiful ROI and we missed the mark. So we really had to come back to the drawing board and give everyone an opportunity to not only explain what was important, but why it was important and completely reshape our strategy. So we did, obviously, but it was a big learning moment for me in terms of, hey, just because this works for 99% of people, don't apply it to everyone. It's not gonna be the same. And that's okay.
Yeah. There's always, lots of good lessons learned. I mean, I think as it relates to other things that can backfire or maybe some tactics to apply to ensure it doesn't happen. I know our AEs, when they talk to the SEs, like there's a list of things that are controversial or, hey, do not mention, do not discuss, like whether it's internal politics, it's a particular project that went sideways, it's a particular person that used to work there that maybe is, maybe not someone that you want to mention for whatever reason. But just making sure that you're avoiding controversial subjects or topics. And then, this is more competitor related, and it'll relate to all of us for competitors, but just making sure that you're being wary of who you're talking to and making sure the customer stories are not too focused on their competitors. So there's an example several years ago where we had a prospect that looked very similar to another customer. And so we felt, hey, we know this market, we know this industry, we know the story so well, like this is really going to land. Well, they had people that had come from that organization and it was like the 4-letter word to say that competitor, right? So you wanted to be very careful. So just, I would say, make sure that if you're going to reference a customer story about a competitor of the buyer or prospect that you're speaking to, that you're doing it, just in great light, with the right tone, the right narrative, and making sure that you're not stepping on your air hose because it can be a hot subject.
Yeah.
One other thing I mentioned too, sorry, Jack, just as it relates to things to avoid. If you tell the wrong story or if you're over embellished too, it can affect post sales. So I know most of this is about pre-sales, but just how you tell the stories, how you're accurate, how you're valid, it will have an impact to the business post sales. So just making sure it's 100% accurate, it's correct, it's through the right context of who you're speaking to with the right use case of the software. So just thinking downstream, not only pre-sales, becoming a customer, but post sales. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen all of those things used and seen them, most of them, if not all of them, backfire as well. So 100% agree with that. It's especially when speaking to specific use cases of specific customers, making sure you're accurate, you're being factual, and it's also has to still be relevant too. I think making sure that the story you tell is relevant is also important. Aditya, I'd love to get your thoughts as well on things that have backfired that you've seen.
Yeah, for sure. I think as SEs, and I'm hopefully this is something that other SEs have also seen as a trait in them, as I like to say, is that just as pre-sales professionals, right? We're so excited about our products for the most part, unless something's going sideways and we know how that is internally, and then we're not excited. But for the most part, when you believe in the product, you're passionate about it, like we tend to be excited and we want to tell someone about it, right? We want to talk to the customer about it. We want to show and tell everything that that product is capable of. But then again, to everyone's point on the call, it's really important to rein yourself in and instead of throwing that kitchen sink at the customer and losing them along the way, as I like to say it, because they get overwhelmed. They think it's much more than what they wanted to sign up for, something like that, or the complexity along it all. That's where we've really got to, I feel, narrow down what we're talking about and addressing the use case that they're trying to get to us with. I have an example from one of the wins about a year ago that is one of the wins that I've been proud about. I have a great relationship with that customer. They came to us with a very specific ask. The product that we were talking about, it was a cloud security offering. We do offer a lot of things in cloud security. There are a lot of aspects, trying to not get very specific here, but can apply to any and all products out there. That there are a lot of features that something could present which the customer might not know of. The way we tackled is that instead of throwing that kitchen sink, as I like to say it, we tried to address what was the problem today and right now. And then while we're going through an evaluation and while we're showing them more things, you with subtlety kind of point them in different directions in the sense that, hey, this is also something that as a best practice, as we've seen out in the industry, because essentially, who are you? You are a customer therapist, as I like to call myself in that sense. So it's good to sometimes expose the customer to the realities that they might not have talked about, but to not do that all at once, just so that there's a little bit of a smooth transition for them. And that's how you also, that's how I've always been able to build trust, is that I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm trying to be in your shoes and trying to show you things that I've learned with some of my customers and I've seen. I'm trying to share those best practices with you guys here. So yeah, just one of those things where it could have backfired, but then, and I've seen it backfiring in terms of when we get really excited and try to show them a lot of things, but then it's really important to rein ourselves back and kind of narrow it down.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'm reminded of a story that actually happened in the office a couple of days ago here at Salio. But I think all great ROI storytelling drives back to value and business outcomes, and it's the bridge between all the features and functions that us in pre-sales want to get out there. Like, we're super excited about the product, especially new feature releases that come out. It's easy to get in the weeds of talking features and functions. And so I'll give you an example. It's like pre-sales. So I saw one of our SDRs. I overheard him on the phone. He got a prospect on the phone. And so he starts going into all this technical jargon and concepts around data injection and taking over the data, and it works in the native product. And I said, Max, you literally, great call, right? It ended fine, but like you spoke a lot about features and functions of what Salio does, but it was nothing about like why it matters to them. Like, yes, it does this data component. Yes, it can inject data. Yes, they can personalize it. But at the end of the day, like, what does that actually mean to them? Well, it means like limited demo prep time. You're not relying on product and engineering. You can tell the right story. Like, those are the things that you need to talk about, not a bunch of technical features and functions on a cold call. So again, and maybe pre-sales of like top of the funnel cold call, but I think it still applies when you actually get into the demo motion of just like making sure you're explaining why it matters to them, like why it's going to impact their business. If you're going to get into the features and functions, just draw the correlation and the connection back.
Yeah, well, I mean, while you're talking and going through this, it's anecdotally, like, my mind's trying to even translate kind of what you're saying about the story with the SDR you're working with there. And I've just been doing a mental math here, and I'm not sure if anyone else has been doing that while we've been going through the webinar, but I think, Allison, you'd mentioned at the start, you remember stories 22 times more than facts. Was that what it was? So I remembered that as I wrote it down, but everything else, I'm thinking back to the things that you've all said, not that you all haven't been great at things you've been saying. I remember the specifics about the stories that you've been telling, what it was about, who it was impacting, a lot more than the specifics of the things you've been saying about the best practices about things. I think that's a big takeaway for all of us sitting here, is that we as SEs, as Aditya was saying, get very excited about our features that we're selling. But if we can relate that into a story, it's going to land more, especially if it's speaking to the value, like Justin, like you were saying, the reasons why someone should care about it. There's nothing worse than hearing a story in the end, you're like, why'd you tell me that story? I don't really understand why we're talking about it. I'd love to maybe kind of follow that thread a little bit about stories that didn't land, stories that didn't prove value, and how we can improve that. It's very tough, especially if you've never told a story before in your sales pitch, if you're not used to doing it. How do you make sure the story you're telling isn't going to be one of those leaves a person going, why did I just hear you tell me that? How do you make sure it lands with somebody? Allison, I'd love to hear from you how do you get started if you've never done this before?
Yeah, and I saw Pam's question come through too. So I have been friends with a guy named Billy Draper for a very long time. He's kind of like the expert storyteller, if he's listening, or shout out. He actually created a storytelling narrative how-to for our pre-sales team. And it's kind of like the way Disney tells a story. Like there's a problem, there's, this is going to happen if they don't fix it. You get to the hero, you get to the arc, and then you kind of tell. And there's like actual people have been putting the books in here, like how to actually tell. Yeah, I think it's kind of like the hero journey. You just put we tied it to what's called moments that matter. So if you take a step back and think about, okay, this is a natural course of how to tell an engaging story, right? Like the books, hero journey, things like that. And then if you use that lens and what we still call it, even at OnTick, is moments that matter. What is happening to your client? What are they trying to solve for? What are they trying to discover or listen for, or whatever that language is? And just apply it to that kind of storytelling methodology, it will hit. So it's not just, I'm just gonna come along with me. Let me tell you a story. Sit on down. It's like, hey, during discovery with you, we learned that, ideally you want someone to go through a nonprofit for your entire life, but you're losing kids around, age 18, for instance. Great. Let me take that fact and all the different pieces we learned and all the different ROI and put them into that journey of how to tell a story. And people are captivated because you're telling them a story, you're telling them their story, and you're telling them in their language. So a lot of different books and topics and things like that people have been sharing. I would do some research and maybe even practice telling friends, like, are you a bad storyteller? Do people zone out when you're talking? Like kind of apply some of these very basic how to communicate in an effective story to your job.
Yeah. Justin, Adisha, same question. Do you have any tips for someone trying to get started? I love that, Allison.
Yeah, I would say those SEs obviously that have the highest EQ and clock speed, like you're going to be the best storytellers because you can pivot really quickly, and it's like picking up cues and data or even like information from discovery and taking your story and making it work. You're being accurate, but you're making it work based upon what you know about them. I would say the most amount of curiosity that you can have internally is going to benefit your storytelling, right? Like there's tons of, I said, every single software company, every company like has fantastic stories out there. And some companies do better than others of how do you surface them? How do you enable, like, how do you inform the team of what those look like? So I think a natural curiosity about your customer stories that your solution's solving for and developing a story bank, right? Kind of a repository of like, hey, these are my go-to, but it starts with you really being curious and wanting to understand, okay, our software does this. How does that correlate to the customers on the problems that it's solving, the business outcomes, and then being able to then surface that into your demo flow and your motion. And I would say, Jack, your question to Allison, like, how do you make sure that the stories resonate or they land? I think you can't always have the perfect story, but one thing that you can do every single time is understand as an SC or SC, just the pause, like just checking the room. Like, is this on track? Like, is this landing? Does this make sense? Like, or like, is this resonating based on what I'm trying to explain? Just really kind of reading the room, having a pause, just doing a gut check to make sure the path that you're going down is resonating. And sometimes it's going to be super clear. You're going to see head nodding. You're going to see emojis in the Zoom. You're going to see, obviously, if you're in person in a conference room, it's going to be really clear on the feedback loop from the prospect to the buyer. But just one great way to ensure they're landing once you have them is just read the room, give yourself time to pause and check. And this is also a really good ham and egg exercise with the AEs, right? I've seen some AEs and SEs just use really good self-deprecating lines and comments just to make sure that things are landing. It's worked well for me in my pre-sales career. So I think just making sure that you're comfortable enough to take a deep breath, take a pause, make sure it's hitting the mark.
Absolutely. I love this. Just as a quick check on time before things run out. We will be having a Q&A at the end. I love everything going on in the chat. Please keep talking there. But if you have specific questions you want our panel to answer, in about 6 or 7 minutes, we're going to hop over to a Q&A for them to go through that. And then before I ask them for their kind of final thoughts, so make sure not to leave before the end of the Q&A so you can hear the actual final hot takes from the panel. So get those questions in there if you have ones you want to ask. I have one more that I want to ask, is a little bit of um, uh, a pivot on kind of what we've been talking about around kind of getting started, making sure things resonate. I'd love to hear a story on the time that a story stalled a deal. I'd love to hear, we got a little bit before about something not to do. Like when is a time when a story is the wrong thing to do? So I'll open up to the panel. So I'm not sure who really has, or if anyone has a story on this, but when have you seen a story not be the right move?
Happy to go, or a detail. I don't want to take all the oxygen out of the air if you wanted to start, but I think for me that it goes back to some situational awareness where I've seen some SEs start to go down a path of storytelling, right? And there's a time and a place for it. But there's also a time and a place where sometimes the buyer just wants to get right to it. Like there are times when they just want to see the feature or function, or they're giving you subtle cues of like, I just need to know, can it do this and does it solve this problem? Like show it to me right now, right? So I think there's some scenarios where you can get into storytelling 80%, 90% of the time, it's the right thing to do. But there are times where time is of the essence. You've got an executive on the phone. They care deeply about one thing and they're not seeing that one thing. Get right to it. So be short, concise, and get to hit where it matters most based upon what they're struggling with.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You want to go?
Go ahead, Allison.
I was just gonna just double click on that, Justin. Obviously, when you're working with your seller and the expectation is that we're going to present an art of the possible, or we're going to present an art of the probable, like you're going to come with us on this journey. But there are those times, your exec meetings, or, we just need a quick, can you do this? I think there's still an opportunity for a story. And what we use is just a basic like limbic opening. Like they're literally saying right now with our Zoom world and our virtual world, it takes up to 7 times for someone to even understand what you're saying, or even pay attention, or even take one fact away from what you were going to say. So if that is the case, you don't have to create this beautiful narrative and you don't have the time. Even just a quick like limbic opening, like connecting it somehow to the customer or whatever they're trying to solve for that day. And it's like 10 seconds to 30 seconds at the beginning of the call just to get people grounded. I've seen that work really well too. So don't think of these, it doesn't have to just be this one way to tell this beautiful narrative. It can be a quick like, hey, we were presenting to it's like an energy company in the Midwest, and we gave a very quick story about literally a cornfield. And one of my SCs used to work on a farm and gave this example how he didn't have power and the farm went out, and that's what happened. And they were just like, "Oh, this guy understands. Let's go." And that's all we had to do. So I think you just, to your point, it just kind of need to be nimble, quick, read the room on if you need to pivot and do something different than you normally would. And I think that's every SC who's worth their weight in salt. We're curious by nature and we're quick. So you can do that in real time if you need to.
And Allison, for anyone here who might be watching who has not read the storytelling books, define limbic opening for everybody if you could.
Oh, limbic opening. My buddy's from Demo to Win. So a limbic opening, you learn the tell, show, tell method. I've gone through it many, many times. The point is at the beginning of your presentation. Let's say you've never had discovery, which sounds terrible, but it happens. Let's say Jack, right? Like I am talking to you about Pre-Sales Collective. Maybe there is some kind of connection that I've seen with SoulCon East coming up, and I make like a fun at the very beginning of how you just on LinkedIn and you did those memes of the guy who's sad, Maybe I get that image, I add that at the beginning, and I say, hey, I don't want anyone to feel sad and alone during this meeting today. I know SoulCon is coming up. Like, let's all be connected and let's have the spirit going into the meeting. And people are like, wait, what just happened? Like, it's just a way to just quickly connect with your audience. It's called a limbic opening even before. So they're like, oh, they're saying something. Or you can call on someone. So, they hear their name. There's just different ways you can start the meeting without having to do a full story.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
I,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I did like your LinkedIn post though, Jack. It was funny.
Yeah. SoulCon East coming up, New York, September
That's how I
4th.
registered this morning because I saw your post.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll piggyback quick off of Justin and Allison's thoughts. I feel just reading the room, as Allison was mentioning, just knowing when there is a need for a story, right? As Justin was mentioning, sometimes it's got to be quick. Sometimes it's got to be, hey, we need this, we have this. Can you help us? And that's one of the examples that I was sharing earlier, is that the customer came to us with a very specific niche use case. For the first part, I tried to go down the storytelling route. I tried to, show a little bit more. Also, my AE, obviously being an AE, stepped in and tried to show the bigger capabilities of the product, of the portfolio. Then the customer really stopped us. They said, "Hey, all of that is good, but today we don't have the budget for that. We are trying to bring in different companies under this one umbrella. They all come with their own solutions. How are we going to be able to migrate all of this over?" So that's something where the story can really backfire, and you've got to really pull yourself back and say, hey, okay, we will talk about just this today, and going off of what your ability is today, what your budget is today, what your appetite is, right? The other aspect where a story can backfire is a story that is picked up from one industry and delivered in a different industry without tailoring it to the specific industry. Two examples that I love to take, because I worked with a couple of different customers across industries. I've worked with startups, worked with healthcare, worked with your traditional enterprises. Um, each of those industries talks such a specific language. The stories are so specific for that story to resonate to that stakeholder in the room. Because if I take a story that was designed for a startup, which is a lean and mean business that's trying to stay afloat, trying to get their product out in the market, would maybe not be ready for your enterprise offering. So you have special pricing for them. You have a smarter way to get in and help them, versus someone like a big enterprise or someone like healthcare, right? Cannot use the same story for one industry onto the other. So it's really important to have that switch really kind of toggle in our heads as SCs as we work with different industries, right? Hey, knowing your customer, knowing which story is going to land, speaking their language. Otherwise, it'll backfire. Because if I go into a startup and I start talking about how a healthcare use case or a big enterprise is going to be impacted by something, those numbers are going to be off. The context is going to be off. So it just like comes down to, as Justin and Allison were mentioning, knowing when to deliver a story and also knowing how to tailor that story. Essentially, those were the two things that I wanted to close it off with.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Before we are done here, I do want to ask for a 1 minute quick final thoughts from each of our panelists. Dicha, we'll start with you, then Allison, then Justin, close us out. What's your final thoughts on the topic?
Um, Final thoughts, just kind of the culmination of everything that I talked about. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Put yourself in the situation that they're at. See that what makes them successful, right? What are they asking you for? Try not to go off on a tangent and use something that go to market has prepared and read it like a script. We've all seen SEs and AEs sometimes do that. That's something that's where you lose trust with the customer or the prospect. the moment they stop seeing you as someone who's listening and someone who's only selling to them. So that's one of the most important things, is that build that trust, put yourself in their shoes, um, be really specific, start from where they are coming from, and then expand from there. Read the room, be subtle with your cues in there. Just few of the things there. Make it memorable, make it quantifiable. Quantities and numbers stick with people. So ROI, the more numbers you leave them with, the more aha moments you leave them with, the more memorable your product and your entire process would be. So that was a quick closing thought for me.
Me?
Allison, yes.
So I have two thoughts. One is a hot take based on what Justin said earlier. I don't really shy away from the controversial things. I kind of lean into them. So if I'm hearing this from one group and I'm hearing this from one group, I'm like, oh, let's dive in there. Like there's a pain point there. And, Jack, to your point, you have to build trust. But I like to understand what that is and see if we can find a, you know, harmony on that. Remember, vacation brain. And I'll give you a story about why I believe so passionately about this. So we were doing a big multi-team workshop, and it was, right at the end of COVID, and no one wanted to travel. So we did a Google form and we sent it to every single team, the exact same questions on, having them fill it out. Great. Well, what we did then is we took all the answers and we put them on this giant virtual mural board. So everyone could see what everyone else's pain points were. And we did direct quotes. We didn't say their names, but we did direct quotes. And then we shared it. And people were like, what? Oh my gosh. But the magic happened when we started facilitating that conversation for other teams to talk and understand the why that was happening and why they were upset and different things, to get to, how we can start solving this in a way, through the lens of our product, right? But the point was, even if you're worried or you think it's going to upset someone, sometimes that's okay. Obviously, emotional intelligence and all the things and being very delicate and trust has to be there. But we were able to completely come with a very different ROI and save the company millions of dollars versus just solving for over here, which would have been, like $100,000 solve. So I just think, get creative and don't be afraid to dive deeper.
Love it. Justin, your final thoughts.
That's great. So Allison kicked us off with what stories are 22. Is it 22 times more likely to resonate than
Actually, it used to be 27 and now it's 22 based on this
22.
virtual world we live in. Yep.
There we go. So what I would say, and a little bit of a soundbite, is that facts fade and stories stick, right? And I can't take credit from that. So Doug, I spoke on a panel with Doug Landis, who's a fantastic storyteller, who threw that quote out there, right? Facts fade and stories stick. So whatever you can do as an SE to build up that library or that story bank is going to be to your benefit, right? And I think the best way to do that is, one, if you've not been around for a while, if you're an SE, AE, over time, you accumulate these stories just organically. When you're around through osmosis or just personal experience, you start to develop them. But most people are not around long enough to hear all the stories. So I think being very, very intentional with your curiosity, to dive into the org, to face internally, and then to deeply, deeply understand your customer, right? Because if you know your customer, if you know what makes them tick, if you know what they struggle with, your ROI storytelling will be much improved. So just make sure you grasp the customer, the pain points that they actually struggle with, and then how your solution ultimately handles that.
Excellent.
So,
Well, we're out of time. Allison, Alicia, Justin, thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to everyone for hopping in the chat and for your questions. I've certainly learned a lot. I've got some facts and some stories that are going to stick with me for sure. And make sure you are signed up with us, PreSales Collective, to see the next one. And thanks again to Salio for sponsoring the webinar today. Take care, everybody.
thank you all. Appreciate it.
Take care.